And we're just now getting into discussions about, is there some utilization of those, but we haven't gone forward with anything specifically yet.
Same here. We got three of them here.
Yep. Well, we had three, but one is kind of off the limits because there's already been a project there. So there's two that we're looking at, and one does include a portion of the downtown area.
The other question I've got is, have you encountered any historical building restoration projects of any kind or in the environs of a historical structure?
Yes, we've done historic building renovations. We have two historic districts within the downtown. We haven't really utilized TIF per se to do that, but we have used some other incentives, such as property tax abatements, tax credits, and those kinds of things. But we haven't used TIF to actually restore a historic building. We're good. Thank you. There you go.
I'm going to bring my notes with me so I don't forget some of the numbers.
He has a lot more information to tell you than I did.
Well, Mike did a good job of summarizing the history of the TIF and kind of the guidelines that we use to generally direct how we use TIF in the city of Sioux Falls. One of the first things that I wanted to do here was pulled out 3 case studies of projects or TIFs. These are all active TIFs within the downtown district. TIF 5 that Mike went through was for the Sharapa redevelopment, which was the only one that we publicly funded. TIF 10 was for the lumber exchange. So Sharapa is up here where the zip feed mill was. And I'll go into some of the eligible expenses that we use just so you can kind of understand why these TIFs qualified under our guidelines. So with TIF 5, TIF 10, and then TIF 14, just looking at the before and after comparison, very heavy industrial uses in this whole area of the downtown, and really changed the scene of what we refer to as the East Bank of downtown. And if you've been to downtown Sioux Falls, this is an area that's definitely taken off in the last 10 years as a result of some of these projects. Just these 3 projects total approximately about $80 million to do, and I'll go a little bit more into the next slide to talk about some of the things that those went to fund. So again, with the Sharapa, that was a publicly funded TIF. Ultimately, there was about $1.5 million in reimbursable costs that were associated with eligible expenses. Those were, again, the demolition of the zip feed mill, which was an industrial structure in downtown. A lot of the site preparation, some soil remediation, along with utility work that occurred there. And then that site also started to form the east bank of our River Greenway. And so that's, again, if you've been downtown Sioux Falls, we have a nice greenway, a nice bike trail that loops the entire city, a 26-mile bike trail that loops the entire city, and it does run through downtown, and we call it the River Greenway, along the Big Sioux River there in downtown Sioux Falls. So this, again, was a project that went to some of those areas. TIF 10 with the lumber exchange, again, was a project right along the river. This was Shonen Lumber was the facilities that were there, and had a lot of older industrial buildings that needed removed. So the demolition of those buildings, site preparation again, some blasting of quartzite rock, contamination. There's some groundwater. With being that close to the river, groundwater is rises into the basements of some of these buildings during certain high water levels, and ultimately in a lot of our downtown area, as that water level comes up, there's contaminants within the water just because of the heavy industrial uses in a lot of these areas. And so there's a dewatering mechanism in a lot of these buildings in the basement, and there's a filter that's very expensive that's regulated by this state DNR that's required. And so a lot of those expenses, again, River Greenway improvements. TIF 10 was also something that we had. There's a parking structure that's added onto that office building, and ultimately we agreed within the agreement that after 30 years of this structure being in existence, the city has the right to purchase that parking ramp from them for a small amount. And so, again, it's something that we wanted the more parking in that area of downtown. The facilities and the buildings that were being built did need them. But again, it was something that would be a benefit to the city as well going forward. And then TIF 14, Mike mentioned this one. This one was where the river ramp expanded the river. So there was a pretty high expense to demo that across the river and all the intricacies that went with that. Environmental remediation, dewatering, and again, the greenway improvements along there were part of the reimbursement of this. So all of these we see as extraordinary costs when we're talking about development. If you were to do these on a greenfield site on some other part of town, these aren't typical development expenses that you would see. But in downtown, we have a lot of these, and that's why a lot of our TIF districts have been centralized in downtown.
It's pretty dramatic when you look at what the base assessed value was and what the current value is. So, pretty good payback on the investment.
So this is one of the active TIFs that's not in our core neighborhood or downtown that we currently have in Sioux Falls. And TIF 15 was created to stimulate recreational, economic, and tourism activity really for the city of Sioux Falls. And really has been a catalyst to this entire area. So there's a lot of things that go along with this project. So this was a project that had 4 different entities involved: the city of Sioux Falls, Sanford Health, a nonprofit that is now managing the Shields Iceplex that's out on this property, and then another nonprofit that's managing an indoor tennis facility on the property as well. And so we as a city really needed to, sporting activities is really a strong driver in what we have in the city of Sioux Falls, and we were looking at building some additional ball fields for those activities, as well as our Iceplex was becoming deteriorated and needed to be replaced, and we didn't really have an opportunity for indoor tennis. So this kind of project here really brought a lot of those things to light. This was a project that was owned by Sanford. Ultimately, they donated the land to the city to build the ball fields, but ultimately the city did incur the cost of building the ball fields. So one of the reimbursable costs was the city receiving reimbursement for the ball fields that were associated with this development. A lot of the reimbursement also went to infrastructure improvements that really created this network or this development out here. So the road network, along with some of the parking that's associated with the nonprofits for the Iceplexes, the Iceplex that's out there, that provides an opportunity for our youth hockey leagues to play out there, as well as the Sioux Falls Stampede practice out there as well. And then we also have the tennis facility again, which was provided an indoor area where that was open to the public for them to be able to come out. And then Sanford's built a number of buildings which really have created the increment or the taxes out in the area. The Sanford Pentagon is an arena that's our local minor league NBA team plays at, as well as some of the college teams, and draws a lot of people to the area. And then they also have what's called their field house, which is where they study sports science and medicine out there, and they do some training of athletes out there as well. There's been obviously spear-off development with some hotel and restaurant and retail in the area that have contributed to the district. And then even the interstate is right here, and there's also some more development that's occurring right along the interstate at a new interchange there off of Benson. So again, this is a open field that again really is different in terms of it didn't follow those extraordinary costs that we typically see with the downtown or our core neighborhoods. But this was something that met a lot of community goals, and so that was why we supported the TIF of this nature. Ultimately, this TIF was approved for over $10 million to do the improvements out there. We have exceeded the 5-year term in which costs can be reimbursed for the TIF, and ultimately we'll end up paying out about $5.3 million. So again, the costs associated with some of the improvements came in a lot less than originally expected, and just kind of the way that naturally developed, there was some less infrastructure that was needed for some of the development.
So, going back to that one, what's outlined in yellow is the sports complex, not the district that the incremental is being taken from.
No, that is the district.
That is the
The
district?
yellow lines are the district. Yeah.
And it's both.
It's both,
Yeah,
it's both, yeah.
Yep.
So where in that plan, because I'm just trying to set it in my mind, is the hotels and the in property tax income producing properties that are creating the incremental payback for this?
Where are they located?
Yeah, within that area.
So all of our ball fields are here closer to the airport. This building shaped like the Pentagon is the Sanford Pentagon, which is the arena. This is their the field house. This is the tennis and then ice. And then here, closer to the main drag, is where some of the retail has started to develop. So there's a retail hockey store that obviously has taken advantage of the hockey and iceplex being out here. There's a hotel here and then a restaurant that's also out here that have been built. I mean, when there's activities going on, there's hundreds and hundreds of families, there's hundreds of teams out here that participate. And so they have activated this area. This development has really activated this area, thus the need for restaurants, hotels, because we do host a lot of youth events that draw people in from outside that need a room to stay.
There's also a gymnastics center that's just
Yes.
opening there too.
Yes.
But we've developed, when the TIF district was created, we developed a land use plan with Sanford and others. And so there's quite a bit of additional vacant land that can be expanded in the future, but obviously we're past that 5-year timeline for the tax increment financing. But it has blossomed quite a bit in just the last few years.
Do you know about how many acres that is?
52,
Yeah,
more or less. Yeah.
that would be one of our largest. Most of our districts are a couple block area in downtown.
I just was kind of wondering the relationship, you got buildings and stuff, but
Yep.
just kind of how immense the site was. Thank you.
And now they're adding an indoor golf facility just outside the southern boundary of the TIF district. So it just keeps growing.
So the current businesses that are there right now are not sufficient to fund this TIF by themselves. You're anticipating more businesses to come into this particular TIF to support the financing, correct?
Well, the buildings out here currently are valued over $36 million, so they're supporting the TIF. This TIF will be paid off in the next couple of years based on the increment that's collected. So this has been a pretty successful one because of the amount of development that's already occurred will ultimately pay this off in the next 4 to 5 years. And this was a district that was approved in 2012. So again, we've always approved historically we've approved all of our TIFs for the 20-year limit, but many of them have, or a few of them definitely have paid off and will pay off sooner.
Did you have to run any off-site infrastructure to get into there? Water, sewer?
Yeah, there was ultimately the Westport is this main drag here. And extension from Westport was mainly the infrastructure that was needed to support the development. So it wasn't major infrastructure from a longer distance away. But
Is that qualifying expenses then?
yeah, we did qualify some of those as eligible expenses within this district to support the uses that we wanted to see. I would say in a project like this, that if it wasn't something that was meeting a community goal, it would be something that we wouldn't be supporting TIF for just extension of utilities though. So we'll get a little bit into our TIF application process, our review process, and how we certify some of the expenses in the TIF. This slide is pretty straightforward. We do meet with the applicants prior to them actually applying for TIF, because what we do have a $2,500 fee associated with application of our TIFs. But one thing that we do prior is we have some pre-application meetings. Just wanting to meet with the developers and see, what are you asking for? What's your project? Where is it located? are there eligible expenses, and just kind of generally understanding what it is and if it's meeting our city guidelines. Because if it's something that would be a greenfield site on the edge of town that's going to be for a retail use, that's something that we typically have not supported through TIF districts. And so we would tell them up front, you know, we can go this route, but historically, city council and our administration has not supported this, and this is going to be a difficult thing to bring forward. And so we do meet with them up front. Sometimes that's one meeting that results in them not applying for a TIF. Could be 3 or 4 meetings. Just depends on the project and where they're at with it. You know, sometimes we get the calls for TIF before a project's even really fully vetted, you know, and so sometimes it's just, hey, can we get this or not? And so if we get past that point where we believe as a staff they generally meet the guidelines, they generally have some eligible expenses, and they're going to need, we do need to review this a little bit further. We will have them submit an application. We notify our city council within 7 days of receiving an application, but typically our process is still a 3 to 4 month period before, you know, they're looking at actual approval of that TIF district. We'll get more into the review of how we review TIFs in the application. We've recently, probably in the last 4 or 5 years, started doing our planning commission briefing before our planning commission hearing. So our planning commission meets